Right. Good night, everybody. Uh, this is Christ Am Disciple once again. It's very late in the night. I know it's very late in the night, but I just wanted to cover this because uh, the former president of DC, this is DC Comics, Diane Nelson, she spoke on a number of situations and issues that happened concerning the Snyderverse, what we call the Snyderverse at least, what happened with Justice League 2017, and the structure of what was going on at Warner Brothers. And there's several things that when I looked at it, I was like, it's kind of a little bit sketchy. You know what I'm saying? I am Christ Am Disciple. You can, if you want to, join as a guest, chop it up with me on the stream. It will be there's the link right there. It's in the chat section, keeping it bubbling. So I looked at that and I was saying to myself, well, man, what is really going on? What's the beat? What's the beat with this thing? You know what I'm saying? So, first of all, can you guys see me? Can you guys see me? Because I'm wondering what the heck's going on here. This is not showing on YouTube. And I'm like 50 seconds into the stream, and my stream is not showing up on YouTube. Not on my phone. Do I have internet? Oh, internet reception. What's going on? So what's up? Can you guys see me? If you can see me, just report that you can see me. Okay. Okay, now I see. Now I see myself. Now we're showing up. Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, so we're gonna go into that what she said, and you guys are gonna get an idea of what I mean by is everything that she's saying true. Now, first of all, for those of you who don't know, Miss Diane Nelson looks like this. All right. This was DC's president. And then the VP under her was Jeff Johns. He was known as the creative officer, creative content officer for DC. That's now held by, I believe, Jim Lee. I think he's both president and creative content officer at present at DC. That's not DC Studios. This is DC Comics. Okay, so I want to go into the article now. This article was published on the 22nd of August, 2023, and I'm going to read through some of the contents of it, okay? So DC Comics president, this is, by the way, if you want to go to the site, it's bleedingcool.com. I got this interview. Former DC President Diane Lane talked about the single biggest thing that made us look amateurish, certainly relative to Marvel, if not just on its own. This is what she was saying. The person who published this article was Rich Johnson. He starts off, David Maisel, former vice chairman, president of Marvel Studios, and CEO of Marvel Entertainment, was the man who pitched the concept of Marvel Studios to Avi Arad and Ike Perlmutter, financing and producing its own movies in a connected cinematic universe, and who also sold Marvel to Disney. Currently, he is the partner in Mythos Studios, which owns Aspen Comics and the rights to Phantom, Soulfire, and Cupid as part of the Mythoverse. But even at his height at Marvel Studios, he feared DC Comics. I was afraid of DC, and their model was hiring final cut directors. And sometimes that works, and you get a Christopher Nolan movie, and sometimes it doesn't, right? Because Marvel was a team effort and the producers were Marvel Studios, as Marvel Studios, we needed directors and writers and talent that wanted to be a part of a team and a culture. But handing over the keys to our final cut director, I don't know how, as a producer, that is fiscally or creatively a responsible decision. Now, I want to say this. This is the start. This is the start of uh, this preamble um, into Diane Nelson's interview. What I want to say first and foremost is the superhero fatigue that we're getting from Marvel movies with this concept that they're talking about, which is a collaborative one. Mainly, you have a team of people and producers. Black Adam actually came about the same way. Who are so there's no singular vision by a director anymore. They're using the producers, it's a collaborative effort by the producers and so on, where more than likely the producers have a lot more say in how the outcome of the movie happens. And you have this team of writers, and you have this token director guy. I remember people not giving much credit to the Russo brothers, but the team of people, and this is what Mr. David Maisel had to say. He worked with Avi Arad and Ike Perlmutter, and they put together this system. I always said Marvel uses a formulaic system. They have a team of writers, they come together, they have their brainstorms, and then they put together a plan for each movie. But as you notice, because they have the same team of people and the same team of producers, you get the same kind of content. The movies don't really, they all feel about the same. And what we are hearing from this DC head, Diane Nelson, and what we're going to hear from her is that DC needs to follow Marvel and have this team of people, and that is not the way to go. Not with this audience. The audience that comes to see DC is an audience that comes to get a singular vision of a director, not a formulaic team effort, but a singular direction. And every time I hear this article is actually purposefully framing framing the interview as a collaborative effort, which is not collaborative, but actually the producers say what they want. Kevin Feige wanted. Having it in other words as a corporate structure instead of a singular vision by a director takes away from the art. But we're going to go into it, and we're going to see what is true and what is not true. And I want, again, my contributions to this community, to Snyder fans and to Snyderverse fans, and to the overall discussion on the direction of DC and why the Snyderverse is preferred and why Zack Snyder should lead DC, and why Zack Snyder is the Kevin Feige of DC. These arguments are going to be put forward by me because I understand what Zack Snyder does. And again, anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go on to continue the interview. Back in July, the Wall Street Journal's podcast, The Journal, hosted by Kate Linebaugh and Ryan Knutson, ran a series of episodes by Ben Fritz, just a Snyder hater, looking at the rise of Marvel Studios from comic book publisher to film studio to Disney's purchase and the executive and creative battles within. It made a few headlines, but there's a lot of gems that seem to be missed, such as Marvel's initial relationship with Sony Pictures, led by our favorite Marvel executives, Avi Arad and Ike Perlmutter. two toy manufacturers who took over the comic book company and made it profitable again. Again, these guys had nothing to do necessarily with making movies, but whatever. Catch up on more coverage with this tag. DC's president, Diane Nelson, compared DC unfavorably to Marvel. Why are you comparing them? I don't know. But anyway, let's just go. As well as David Maisel talking about DC's approach compared to Marvel, they spoke to an old friend of Bleeding Cool, the former president of DC Entertainment, Diane Nelson, who was there for the whole Zack Snyder Justice League debacle at Warner Brothers. For 22 years and president for 9, she had some issues regarding the Marvel DC comparison too. Diane Nelson says, certainly, there was an undercurrent of frustration that we were not hitting the mark. We were not a standalone studio the way Marvel was. This is DC. She's talking about DC Comics, of course. They were a freestanding studio with their own production budgets and their own production staff. They were really charting their own course, and they did an amazing job of it. The fans assumed that we at Warner Brothers were replicating the organizational structure of Marvel. In fact, we did not, and it was quite intentional. Agreed. You want to have a different approach. She continues, I don't know that there was an appreciation for the extent to which the DC team really just had a seat at the table. Meaning that DC Comics, they just sat at the table, but they didn't really make major decisions. We would have the heads of each of the relevant businesses and DC to talk about DC-related issues, including our own slate of films and TV shows, video games, and so forth. So DC Comics actually had their own films and stuff, the animated ones, I believe she's talking about. And of course, probably DC TV shows. Now, she and Jeff Johns were the two heads that sat at the table. It just wasn't the culture of Warner Brothers to dictate a particular strategy. Marvel Studios pioneered the idea of a slate of upcoming films and TV shows displayed for fans that showed a planned rollout of connected stories, and Warner Brothers followed suit for DC movies. But Diane Nelson wasn't happy. The idea of a slate just felt like window dressing. The bottom line is, there was never a thoughtful, well-controlled, confidential slate process. I think it's the singular biggest thing that made us look amateurs, certainly relative to Marvel, if not just alone. Now, I want to just say, we as fans knew what the original slate was. We knew how it was supposed to go. But once again, Diane Nelson is saying something that is not true. There was an original slate, and there was action to act on that, and she's going to acknowledge that in a minute. Why was Zack Snyder seen as DC's Kevin Feige? In the fan press, with Zack Snyder directing Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Justice League 1 and 2, and with his film setting up and spinning off into Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Flash, Cyborg, and more, Snyder was regarded in the same way that Kevin Feige was at Marvel. In his own way, I agree. He was. Because if you do look, he's the one that rolled out BBS at Comic-Con. He's the one that introduced the directors in Comic-Con. He's the one that started talking about the plan and the vision, how they wanted to broaden it out and expand it to Justice League. He was the one that knew that these 3 movies, it was supposed to be a 5-part arc that was going towards the whole entire Justice League saga, and that was supposed to be his Snyderverse. This is his line of movies, and then there were other movies intertwined dealing with that. So there was a plan, and it was to be executed a certain way. However, she's not mentioning what Jeff Johns' role in that whole thing was and how he sabotaged it. Let's keep it moving. But she will actually acknowledge some of this. And this is why I said, is she really speaking the truth, or is she trying to cover her butt? Never know. Right. So Snyder was regarded in the same way that Kevin Feige was at Marvel. Diane Nelson pushed back against that. Unless there were meetings that happened that no one told me about. Of course, she was across at DC, which is possible. I don't know that there was ever any conversation where it was decided that Zack would be leading the DC slate for any particular period of time. So even if it wasn't a conscious decision that Zack Snyder was or Kevin Feige from a consumer standpoint, that's kind of what happened for a while there. There is a place for Zack's movies, and I've always wanted Zack to be a part of the DC film lineup. But should he have been the one defining that universe? Maybe not in hindsight. Hard questions. Okay, now, that's what she said. How could he be the one defining the universe if he wasn't the one who was leading it? And so, in her own admission, whether she thinks it's from a consumer standpoint or otherwise, she acknowledges that he was the guy that was leading the DC slate. And clearly was, because he was the one that started the universe. Mm-hmm. And then he's the one that started introducing the other directors, the other people who were on board, and what they were supposed to be doing. He was the one. The hype was around him. But these were all separate directors with their own visions for the characters, and they would be free to explore that within the fabric of how the universe was created. This is what Zack Snyder was doing. And she's going to make a second acknowledgement of this as we go on. Then there was what happened after Zack Snyder delivered his version of Justice League. There was a desire to ensure that the movie was not too long. Again, she's an understudy of Kevin Suchiara, if you don't know. That the movie was not too long and that there was an opportunity for more heart and humor. Those words keep on coming back, and that's something Jeff Johns used to hammer home. Mark Waid hammers home. In fact, Jeff Johns appeared, let me see if I can find it. I should have it somewhere around here. Yes. So this here, The Flash, the saga of the Scarlet Speedster, this is part of the Flash DVD or whatever extra thing's supposed to come out, right? And in this, you see Andy Muschietti, you see all the people that were in the Flash movie, but in addition, you also see Mr. Jeff Johns will show up in a second. Because he's featured throughout this whole thing. Okay, these are different people being introduced right now. Hold on a second. I'm going to get it. Yeah. So you see they start off with Zack Snyder's Justice League Flash. And he's all through this video. There he is. All right, they have him as writer, producer. That's because even though he no longer was in the office of the chairman, executive chairman, officer, CEO of DC Films, he still operates in a very consultant. He's also a writer and he's also a producer in these films to this day. And he's still imposing his ideas on creators. I'm saying imposing. Some creators go to him for advice and whatever, but he's been not only actually the upcoming Aquaman film. Again, this is mainly his story, his idea, but he's been doing it for Blue Beetle. He's been doing it for all the films actually, and that's what a lot of people don't know. He's been still pushing himself on all these creatives and all these people. Yeah, but let me go back to what Diane Nelson has been saying because she and Jeff Johns were working. She said he's not know anybody of hers. She was defending the Joker movie when it came out, and then people said, "Why are you defending Joker, but you're not defending with Zack Snyder's movies when it was time to defend his movies?" Oh, you'll understand all of that by and by. I'm not saying she's a bad person per se, but you'll understand it all by and by. Okay. So she said there was a desire out, by the way, in this video that I just showed you guys, which you can go ahead and check out online. It's the Flash 2013, the saga of the Scarlet Speedster documentary. You will hear them talk a lot about heart and hope and fun. He's a fun character, heart, hope, fun. They just like you swear somebody gave them a script or something because they emphasize it over and over and over again. And it's like, and most of the people who are talking are comic book writers. And there's a difference between a comic book and live action, you know. And while you want to get the essence of the characters, you have to ground them into the reality to make them believable. There's a reason why DJ, doesn't want anything to do with Jeff Johns. Because guess who was on The Flash? Jeff Johns was there. He was there. He put his input in there, you know. And I got more information for you guys on that, but that's another time, another day. So Diane Nelson says, then there was what happened to Zack Snyder. He delivered his version of Justice League, and there was a desire to ensure that the movie was not too long and that there was an opportunity for more heart and humor. And then, we were going to bring in another director to help. That would be Joss Whedon, who would heavily rewrite, recut, re-edit, and shoot new footage, including the now infamous CGI Superman lip, where Henry Cavill had grown a mustache and he couldn't shave for filming Mission Impossible. And what did Diane think of what they got? My characterization is just was a bit of a shiny penny during a time when we were looking for something shiny to grab onto. Yeah, I thought the film was terrible. Yeah, I would have much preferred a darker than I wanted or longer than I hoped for a Zack Snyder cut than the Frankenstein cut we got in the theaters. The Trinity characters of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman should have, by any measure, blown any other superhero movie away, and it didn't. The terrible final film, A Frankenstein Cut, Diane looks back saying, there are so many things I would have done differently. I certainly think that DC would have benefited, the company would have benefited much more strongly had DC been its own independent entity. Now she's going to this, with its own ability to mandate and set a slate and a vision for its properties. Whomever ran it, it needed to report to the CEO of it, and I believe should have been set up independently, the way Marvel was, for its own budgets and so forth. Well, guess what, Diane Lane? That's what's happening today. And guess what? With Walter Hamada, Jeff Johns, and John Berg, that's what you got. You got DC Studios, you got DC Films. It's not doing anything. The films are doing horribly. All right? Because all that heart you're talking about, and the needing lighter and all that, people don't want that bullshit at DC. They don't. They want realism. DC is not Marvel. And the more you try to pattern after Marvel, is the more you're going to fail. As my boy said, Damien Anthony Vincent, they need to dissolve DC Studios. It's a waste of time. They deal with independent directors with different visions, singular visions, but you can have a connected universe still if you don't have people like Jeff Johns messing it up, where he's trying to destroy the continuity continuously and force on the creators his idea of what a perfect DC character is. right? And we're going to go into some of that a little later. A few years ago, we would get Zack Snyder's Justice League director's cut so everyone could judge for themselves and come to precisely the same conclusion as Diane Nelson. I do not agree with what Diane Nelson said. We don't need a DC Studios. But she said something else, which somehow I've managed to miss, which is that, let's see. She's saying he shouldn't have been the one to define the universe. And I think he should be. I think he's the perfect person to define DC because, oh, besides Zach being a comic book head, Zack Snyder's take was so different. And even what Patty Jenkins did with Wonder Woman 2017 was different. The fact that you had fresh directors actually giving you something different. You have directors attached to Marvel's names. It's just director in name. It's not director in terms of what they can do. The only directors who have done something different in Marvel to this day are the director who did Black Panther, which was starkly different from any other Marvel movie. The Russo brothers felt for the same thing, the jokes, the whatever. You could tell the producers had a lot to do with that. You had Captain America, the First Avenger was one of the movies where it was different, right? Everything else to me was felt like the studio was heavy-handed in how it conveyed things and how it put messages forward. And they had a heavy rein and a heavy idea of what they wanted to do. And I didn't feel like the directors were really doing much of anything. Even the music had its own, James Gunn got some leeway, but for the most part, most directors, again, are working with a certain kind of music. And they kind of got a little bit innovative when it came to the Thor movies. But again, mostly jokes and just the same Marvel formula straight through for these unknown directors. So I don't understand Diane Lane's critique of them not being very organized. I just don't get it. I mean, Zack Snyder's at Netflix, and is he being very organized? He still launched a whole universe. He's launched two, and they're doing fine. And he has directors under him. I don't get it. I really don't. So I disagree with most of what she said in this article. And the fact that she even says that Joss Whedon's Justice League was terrible, but she's agreeing that they wanted it a certain runtime and they wanted, a lot more heart and stuff. I mean, if that's what you wanted, why did you hire Zack Snyder? You know what I'm saying? And when has that worked for you since 1978? When has that actually worked for you? Right? Aquaman was zany, Did it have a lot of heart in it? No. James Wan was able to get some edge off of it, really feed off the action scenes that you've never seen before. That's what drew people to Aquaman. And in fact, that Jason Momoa was just, he was all in for the Snyder Cut. And seeing that happen. And James Wan has his audience and everything. And it's an action movie, so James Wan was able to put some good action together. The highlights of the movie were the rooftop scene and the trench. There really wasn't much of anything else that was great, and that's what could draw you in because of just the action and something you've never seen before. But quite frankly, that movie was terrible. It was just like all these Marvel movies we've gotten so far. I'm calling them Marvel movies, but they're really movies DC. These theme park rides. You may get one or two little nuggets in the theme park ride, but it's basically just a theme park ride. And I'm not really into that. Black Adam was probably the best of all these theme park rides. Shazam a little bit. I mean, the stuff that they pivoted so far away from rich films, films that really could change the world and change how people approach things. I don't know why they did that, but and Diane Lane, you know, is trying to conform and agree with this. And the thing about Diane Lane is she's never even read a comic book in her life. She's not even a comic book reader. So it's like listening to somebody talk about comic books, but you don't understand. You're the head of DC Comics and you have not read a comic in your life. Like for real, lady. So, you know, all of those things they just don't resonate. They just don't resonate. I'm gonna go into something else here. So of course a Snyder fan said this to Diane Lane on Twitter, September 18, 2019. She was like, in defense of Joker and its repulsive violence, she came to the defense of Joker. Androider said, you couldn't defend the Zack's movies and whatever little darkness there was. Busy playing politics then. But now I guess dark violence is cool. Release the Snyder Cut. Too busy helping her buddy Jeff destroy his work from the inside. Too busy helping her buddy Jeff destroy his work from the inside. She said, he's no buddy of mine. Now, Diane Lane, to be fair, as president of DC Comics, has never really said anything negative about Zack Snyder. Okay. But when she's coming out here speaking now as if, you know, because she does have respect for Zack Snyder and what he does, I think she just felt that he shouldn't have started the universe. He shouldn't have set the tone for the universe. And they thought, apparently all these executives wanted the film differently, and because she included, agreed to changing up the film, we got what we got, which was atrocious. And the things they did to this man in there, and this man was the brainchild of how this thing was going to expand. How obviously he was the Kevin Feige of the area. We can see it now. He's got Rebel Moon going on. He's got Army of the Dead universe going on. He's proved that he's Kevin Feige. So what Diane Lane is saying doesn't hold any water when she says, you know, we don't know who was really in leadership, and she was saying things like, you know, Zack Snyder's not really the Kevin Feige of the. Listen, man, he was. Y'all should have gone with him. He will take y'all places. Y'all didn't do that, right? So you can't be looking at hard questions. Probably he shouldn't have been there. If he shouldn't have been there, then Christopher Nolan shouldn't have been there. We got to go there because your success came when you woke up, somebody slapped you in the face, you know, because again, these execs are so stupid, right? Christopher Nolan got to do the Dark Knight trilogy because he ended up doing Inception, right? He saw the script, he wanted to do Inception, but Warner Brothers, actually, the stupid execs turned him down. And it was another guy who spoke to execs and said, listen, this is the guy for the job. You need it. And because Christopher Nolan's not a Hollywood guy, he's not big up in Hollywood, right? And because Christopher Nolan, the exec looked at it and realized, oh shit, this guy is really, Christopher Nolan did Inception. And after Inception, he started doing Batman Begins. Okay. So there are not enough visionary people inside of there. A lot of these people, they have no experience in filmmaking whatsoever. They're just there to make money, investments, and direct a company. And that's not how Christopher Reeve actually, you know, he bemoaned this, that a lot of these people are not big cinephiles. They're not big fans of cinema. They're just there to make a buck. And it's sad because they don't know the process. Now you have other producers who part of the process and everything, but some producers, they get too involved. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about right now. And one of them is Jeff Johns. And I'm not saying that you can't be an advisor or you can't be a consultant about DC Comics, but you cross the line when you go into filmmaking, when you go into live action directing, and you're trying to tell actors or you're trying to tell directors, you know, what to do. And I know they do it in the TV circuit. In the TV land, producers are more powerful than directors. They're more powerful than actors. And that's the same model has been adopted for Marvel. That's why we say Marvel's like TV land brought to the screen. It's like that's why they said it's not cinema. They say it's more like a theme park ride. Okay. Um, and there are comic book movies that are cinema with a singular director's vision, but this model had been adopted and taken. Now, Walt Disney has most of the properties, whatever. Kevin Feige did a great job with it, but it's not a model that works for DC. It just doesn't work. It's not profitable because the people who come, most of the people who come to see DC are not coming for some sort of formulaic movie by committee. You heard Zack Snyder say, I don't do movies by committee, right? And what Diane Nelson is subscribing to is movies by committee and a separate studio to do this. And that worked for Marvel, but it will never work for DC. It's not going to work for DC. It's not about producers and people getting involved in the process and putting their input in. It's not about a team of writers. That's what happened with Black Adam. Black Adam had a team of writers, executives were in the process and so on and so on and so on. And it still flopped. It still didn't do well. It didn't do well enough, right? And that's because, and it's a well-made film, more or less, kind of. It's still patchy. They had to cut out parts of it. You could tell they cut out parts of it. And the CGI is not that tight. It's tighter than most of the CGI we've seen of late, especially the Flash's CGI. I can't even believe DJ Jordan. How were you even a part of that? Like, what did they do? Did they do reshoots on top of that and made the stuff just crap? That's probably why you don't like Jeff Johns, because there's a reason you don't like Jeff Johns. And I feel he was hands-on in that thing, and that's a whole other story for another day, but I'm going to come to it. But I just wanted to say that Diane Nelson, she said a couple of things, but there's a lot to what she's saying, and it's not, I don't believe it's true. Now, let's talk about Mr. Jeff Johns for a minute, shall we? So I told you that Jeff Johns pops up on the saga of The Flash, and this is, of course, directly related to the Flash movie that came out that was a flop. All right. And why I'm mentioning Mr. Jeff Johns that shows up there, who's a writer and producer, is because I want to give you a little history about this guy and how this guy thinks he's the Kevin Feige of DC. And boy, here we go. So I'm going to give you a little history. Okay. When you go to the Hollywood Reporter, it says Jeff Johns is confirmed as DC Entertainment president. So he held two titles. He held the title of president of DC and chief creative officer of Warner Brothers. Okay. So he reported to Diane Nelson. He was a co-CEO or co-head of DC Studios, along with John Bird, who reported at the time to Kevin Suchiara. Now, that happened, make sure I have the right date here. That happened July 27th, 2016. July 27, 2016. So this is after BVS. This is in between BVS and the Suicide Squad. He became head of DC. Co-head of DC. And then in 2018, June 11, 2018, he exited as the co-head of DC, and he surrendered his position as the DC creative officer and president. Okay, surrendered those titles. But he surrendered them in exchange for a deal with the studio to have first look writer producer deal with the parent company for Green Lantern Corps. So he actually was the guy. He would, any presentation of anything that has to do with Green Lantern Corps, that IP, he gets the first look at it. And he will say whether he wants to do it or he doesn't want to do it. And if he doesn't want to do it, then, so that's how Zack Snyder can't do the Green Lanterns in his movies, because Jeff Johns blocked it. Because Jeff Johns wants to do his Green Lantern movie. It's not a movie, it's going to be a TV show now. And so Jeff Johns blocked Zack Snyder from having the Green Lanterns inside of his movie because he has this agreement with Warner Brothers that came out of his removal as DC Entertainment president. But here's the thing. It's September 19th, 2019, which would be more than a year after he was supposedly removed as CEO of DC Entertainment, that supposed official post. We see Mr. Jeff Johns is reportedly still working with Walter Hamada because John Berg was removed. John Berg was the other co-head. He was removed earlier. Jeff Johns was working with Walter Hamada. Then Jeff Johns had to step down as DC Entertainment president. Even though he stepped down and he was now just a writer producer with his company. His company was called Mad something. I don't know what it's, I can't remember the name right now. Here he is working with Walter Hamada, the CEO and the head of DC, on future live action DC projects. Okay. This is the guy that brought in Joss Whedon to do extensive reshoots on Zack Snyder's Justice League. So if Jeff Johns stepped down as CEO of DC Films, why was he still working with Walter Hamada? Why? Okay. So what am I saying? Okay, let me see if I can make this clear to you guys so you'll understand what I'm saying. I'm saying this. And Mr. Jeff Johns was responsible. Once Walter Hamada was in power, Mr. Jeff Johns was in power too, because he was working with Mr. Walter Hamada. So Mr. Jeff Johns was around for Justice League debacle. He was head of DC at that time. He was head of DC actually with John Berg for the Suicide Squad that came out, David Ayer's Suicide Squad, and it's they that messed up that thing. It's not, I was thinking it was just all these execs. Yes, the execs agreed with them, but they were the ones that got this trailer park people to go and redo Ayer's cut. It's Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns the one changed up the ending of Wonder Woman. Okay? When Patty was fighting against the execs, she was fighting against Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns the one saying, oh, I don't know, No Man's Land thing needs to be there. Okay? When they talk about the executives, they're talking about Jeff Johns. Toby Everett came on scene around 2017. Toby Everett's first thing was Justice League 2017. Jeff Johns was the man. He was in charge of DC. He brought in Joss Whedon. In fact, I have the data here. I literally have the report on that. I took a picture somewhere. I'll find it. Okay. Jeff Johns is the guy that brought in Joss Whedon. So Jeff Johns is the guy that brought in Matt Reeves to replace Ben Affleck's Batman. So Jeff Johns has been just a pest when it comes to DC. They called him DC Savior. He's not DC Savior. He's the worst possible thing. So here's Mr. Jeff Johns. His name is not there. They have Chris Terrio and Joss Whedon as doing the screenplay for this atrocity here, and it is an atrocity. You know, I hear my boy Leroy Kong say, you know, it's entertaining and stuff. No, it's not entertaining. Not anymore. Not when you know what you know. And then Mr. Jeff Johns was a writer on Aquaman. But here's the kicker. I don't know why I'm not seeing it, but whatever. That's crazy. Where's Shazam? You know the Shazam movie? That Shazam movie, Jeff Johns had a role to play in that. And I'm going to explain to you how that comes to be. I'll explain to you. Even though David Sandberg is credited as the man who wrote the story for Shazam, Jeff Johns was there, right? His producer credit means something totally different. Birds of Prey, Kathy Yen's movie. Who dialed it back? Jeff Johns was behind that too. Jeff Johns was behind that too. Of course, Jeff Johns did Wonder Woman 84. And if you think about Jeff Johns' movies, they all have that same happy ending. It has to end in a happy ending somehow. And if you look at the movies, they're always dialed back. Like a rated R movie, you ain't got to worry about nothing. It's a rated R. You know, you can go as hard as you want. But then you see, Harley Quinn shooting people with those bags and squeaky toys and stuff, and you're saying that's whack. Why she ain't killing them? You know what I'm saying? James Gunn went all the way with his one. But all right. So Jeff Johns was actually in the screenplay writing and the story for Wonder Woman 84, which is all, again, dialed back. The Suicide Squad, I don't think he had anything to do with this, but he did bring on James Gunn to DC. So make of it as you will. Still his work. Black Adam, he wrote. Again, he was one of the guys that wrote the story for Black Adam. Okay. Black Adam should have been rated R. There was another movie that was dialed back. You can talk about MPAA ratings how much you want. It was dialed back. Shazam Fury of the Gods, again, David Sandberg is the guy that actually wrote it. And then Henry Gayden, Chris Morgan, they sort of fine-tuned it. James Gunn had a lot of say in the script and how it ended up. But what's interesting here, again, is Jeff Johns was somewhere in there. And Joss Whedon. Because Jeff Johns and Joss Whedon have a certain kind of humor. So this director is this director's a director in name. They were doing the Marvel formula thing, and some of the guys who they ain't got producer credit or nothing, they working in the background. Okay, that's what was happening. The Flash, you saw. Do I need to bring it back up? You don't see Jeff Johns in the background, but he's there. Right? He's there. He's there, all right. He's in this movie. He has, I believe he probably, in fact, I'm gonna show you all something. I'm gonna show you all something. I'm gonna show y'all something. So, see that? I'm gonna read a little bit. Jeff Johns producing Flash movie provided script treatment for live action film. Now this happened May of 2009. But what I'm saying is he proposed a draft of the Flash back in 2009. And Jeff Johns is the one that was pushing for Flashpoint. So the Flashpoint movie was going to be off of his Flashpoint. The movie we got, Jeff Johns still, I believe, in fact, in spite of the fact that Andy Muschietti and the other lady, Jeff Johns, Mark Waid, those kinds of guys, they had their contribution in it. That's why you get in interviews with them. And Jeff Johns had his contribution to this Flashpoint paradox kind of thing that was going on here. Because this was a pet thing that he wanted to do. And when he took over DC, he wanted to do this Flashpoint. And I believe Jeff Johns, again, had say in this. And what I mean by Jeff Johns had say, right? Because why were we seeing this guy in this movie, in this documentary then? Why is he there? You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to show you all something. I'm going to show you how this guy functions. I'm going to show you how Jeff Johns functions. Comicbookmovie.com. You can always check it out online. Former DC Films co-president Jeff Johns allegedly opposes Superman having a black grandfather in Krypton. Krypton was a series on Sci-Fi. It wasn't bad, but we could tell Jeff Johns brought a character that was like himself into Krypton, and some of the writing went off on a tangent, and David Goyer was the guy that sort of set up Krypton to happen, but Jeff Johns is always somewhere in the background trying to influence and put his input into Krypton, and that's what happened as a producer. So this is what happened. The Hollywood Reporter reveals that Krypton's creators were keen to bring some diversity to the DC universe, with Bridgerton breakout star Reggie Jean Page among those who auditioned for the role of Superman's grandfather. Johns, however, allegedly contended that the Man of Steel could not have a black grandfather, and also vetoed Adam Strange being gay or bisexual. The former DC Films co-president Jeff Johns is said to have vetoed Superman having a black grandfather in the now canceled Krypton because he felt the character should look like a young Henry Cavill. Now, explain this to me. How can a non-live action creative veto a creative decision by live action people, directors, producers, whatever, correct, directors, people who actually do the creatives, writers, directors, whatever. I got more. I want to show you how this guy works as a producer. He behaves like if he's a TV producer or something. That's if he has a lot of clout. And this is the problem. And he's been doing this, like I said before, you saw back in 2009. Now, the thing about this guy is like he's a ghost. I think his production is called Mad Ghost Productions anyway. He's like a ghost. He's not seen. So if the film fails, he doesn't have to take any of the blame. He only gets credit for wins. Okay, that's how Jeff Johns works. This guy was the guy that pushed a certain narrative and a certain story for Superman Returns. Okay, Jeff Johns been around. Okay, he's the guy behind Green Lantern that flopped. Okay, this guy was bad news from a long time ago. Okay, this guy been producing and being behind the scenes with flop movies for a very long time because he has a fixated view on how these movies could be. He and a certain set of writers. He's not very flexible. Okay, and the people who talk like him and say Superman should wear underwear and blah 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 and it should be go blah blah blah. Those people are Jeff Johns followers. All right. He's built up animosity to people who are creative in the studios, in Warner Brothers Studios, by getting the execs against them. And the execs buy into his bullshit, and he ends up making bullshit movies. Why is it that Zack Snyder could not allow his Green Lantern to be seen in his movie? Because some bullshit guy named Jeff Johns, who's not even a filmmaker, could call that decision because he's got this first view option. Okay. Warner Brother Pictures, Mr. Abdi and Mr. Mike Abdi and Mrs. Pam DeLuca. I'm going to spit it straight to you. This guy, Jeff Johns, y'all need to get rid of him. Because he's not helping anything. He's just destroying things. He's a guy who his view on comic book characters is not flexible. He is not a creative when it comes to the art of acting, when it comes to the art of directing, when it comes to all the other professional things that are involved in movie making. Okay, he feels he's all that and a bag of chips. I'm going to go on because, as I said before, this guy is trying to tell actors how to act. He's trying to tell directors how to direct, and he's never done it in his life. But let's continue. The former co-president of DC Films has come under fire from Krypton writer Nadria Tucker on social media as well. She tells the trade that one argument saw Johns object when a black female character's hairstyle was changed. I said, black women, we tend to change our hair frequently. It's not weird. It's a black thing. She pointed out. And he said, no, it is not. And he vetoed it. And then an apologist comes in there to apologize for him. He's John's spokesperson and says, well, he can't be racist because he was once married to a black woman and his second wife is Asian American. What does that have to do with anything? What are you, a non-creative when it comes to filmmaking or television shows, heavy-handedly telling creators what they can and cannot do? Who are you to do that? Shout out to Leroy Kong. Hello to you. Great live. Thank you. Thank you, my brother. All right. And if you want to join on here, even at this late hour in the night, you want to join, there's the StreamYard link if you want to come on board. I'm going to go on to some more stuff. I'm going to show you some more about this guy because it's a lot more. On the Justice League 2017 set, when I read this, I couldn't believe what I was reading because this is what you call studio tampering, where people who don't know how to stay in their lane, they go out there and they do things and mess up movies. And I've heard about this. Chris Terrio actually talked about this, but it's just amazing. So here we go. This is from The Hollywood Reporter, dated April 6, 2021. Ray Fisher opens up about Justice League, Joss Whedon, and Warner's "I don't believe some of these people are fit for leadership." This is by Kim Masters, who's an excellent journalist. Fisher turned to Johns, who he says had presented himself as a kind of mediator. But Fisher says his ultimate response was, "We can't make Joss mad." Publicist Howard Bragman, who represents John, denies that, but says Johns recalls suggesting that any creative pitches should happen when Joss Whedon was not preoccupied, so he would be most receptive, which is effectively the same thing as what we don't want to make the guy mad. We don't want to, So ultimately, in the end, it's just a matter of, semantics. Warner Studio, okay. Once Whedon got involved, Fisher says that Johns told him that it was problematic that Cyborg smiled only twice in the movie. These kinds of crazy criticisms that we hear from these so-called real DC fans, we realize they originate from Jeff Johns. So Jeff Johns is now telling Ray Fisher, who, by the way, was collaborated with Zack Snyder in formulating this product, this character of Cyborg. They had a collaborative process where Ray Fisher was bringing organic things from his past and from you're violating an actor by telling them how they should act when they've been acting a certain way throughout the movie. They agreed, they talked, they discussed it with the director before, and now you're trying to tell them to change, undo all of that, and just follow you. And you're not a director. These guys, the guy who's talking right now is Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns is not a director, right? Which tells me that Jeff Johns had a lot more clout and say in what was happening on that set. And Joss Whedon was actually implementing what Jeff Johns wanted to happen. Because Jeff Johns brought Whedon in, right? To make and listen to this. You're gonna get it. You're gonna get it. Because it's gonna all pay out. Because I read it already. So anyway. Once Whedon got involved, and again, this is not my words, okay? This is coming from the Hollywood Reporter reporting on this. And this was dated April 6, 2021. Once Whedon got involved, Fisher says that Johns told him that it was problematic that Cyborg smiled only twice in the movie. This is so superficially stupid, but whatever. Fisher says he later learned from a witness who participated in the investigation that Johns and other top executives, including the then DC Films co-chairman John Berg and Warner Studio chief Toby Emmerich, had discussions in which they said they could not have an angry black man at the center of the film. John's rep responds that once the chairman of the studio mandated a brighter tone for the film, all further discussions centered on adding joy and hopefulness to all six superheroes. There are always conversations about avoiding any stereotype of race, gender, or sexuality. So these non-filmmakers got together. John Byrne, who's a producer, Tommy Eric, who was the then president of DC Films, CEO of not DC Films, but of Warner Brothers Pictures, Warner Media, whatever you want to call them, and Jeff Johns. They met together, and they discussed, and the executive arm said, "Okay, we're going to have a brighter movie now because Zach is gone, so we're going to spruce this up and make it a brighter movie." These people have never made a film in their goddamn lives. Think about what I'm saying now. So the clueless people, they're not even involved in Joss Whedon. They got in their little huddle. Good Lord. They made the decisions how the film is going to be and the tone they want. And then they went to Joss Whedon, and Joss Whedon is going to execute that. So Joss Whedon was a lackey for them. They're basically trying to do what Marvel does, right? They're the producers. In television, the producers have more sway than the writers, than the directors, right? And in movies, to some degree, it's kind of like that too, because the principal story, let's say Zack Snyder did the story for, or let's say Zack Snyder did the story for Rebel Moon, for example, right? The screenwriter who's writing with him, he's just the guy that writes it out as a screenplay. But he's really subservient to the guy who's telling the story. Just like with Christopher Nolan and David Goyer when they wrote the story for Man of Steel. Christopher Nolan, David Goyer spin out the story. He pitches it to Christopher bounces it back and forth with them, and then David Goyer goes and writes the script. You got it? So it's very much like that. Now, with television, it's a little bit different in that with television, the director really don't got no clout. He's like put in place to just say action and stuff. It's the producers that have a lot more clout in television, right? So Jeff Johns is coming with that mentality into filmmaking, which is not television, right? And he's trying to have the Marvel approach, but he's not trying to be collaborative. He's like the Kevin Feige. He's got a set of people who have the same views as him, so it's not really collaborative. It's him, John Berg is kind of on his side, kind of, and then you got the Toby Emmerich. They get in their huddle, they decide how they're gonna pitchfork the film. You know, this is another man's film, but they're gonna build on his foundation, and they're gonna take the film in another direction, right? Because they feel the film is not one they like. It has nothing to do with you. When you're a business person, you need to learn you're not making films for you, you're making films for the public. It doesn't matter what your personal love is. It doesn't matter what your personal interest is. What matters is the public's interest. Okay? And the director is going to stay true to the director. They're going to make a film that's best for them because they have to look from the viewpoint of them. And if it translates to the public, great. Because it will. Because all you have to think about is what makes you. Directing is a very subjective thing. But yet at the same time, it is something where when you tapping into the commonality of the human psyche, when you're writing such stories on the commonality to make it organic and real, the idea is to make it real and relatable. And the only way is to delve deep within yourself to bring out that reality of what is common amongst us. If I, for example, I would not be a very effective doctor if a doctor who has gone through, for example, cancer, say intestinal cancer, prostate cancer, whatever it is, would be a much more effective doctor to someone who is going through whatever stage of cancer they're going through, because they have actually experienced it. It's kind of like you go into a workplace, right? You may have a fresh degree. You may have your bachelor's degree. You may have a master's degree in whatever you're doing. but you have no experience. When you go into that workplace, you'll meet people who probably have those degrees too, or not, but they have a lot of experience. It's about doing something. When you do something, you have a lot more experience than somebody who just theoretically knows it, right? It's the same thing. How can you really help people with illness if you've never been ill or you've never experienced it? Even with Jesus, Jesus had to experience our sins. He had to experience our iniquities that when he bore it upon us. Because if he not, he couldn't save us. All right, so getting back to this. So Toby Emmerich, John Berg, and Jeff Johns, they came together and they decided that, the tone of the film that's supposed to happen, even though the man, Zack Snyder, set the tone for his film already, so you're gonna have a Frankenstein of a film. And then on top of that, these crazy people said, we can't have an angry black man in this movie. So, he's gonna have to change up his way. This is what they said. That's madness. It's just pure madness that people who have no affiliation to filmmaking are trying to direct creatives in the direction they should go. This is what Johns told Fisher. I'm going to continue reading this. Johns told Fisher he should play the character less like Frankenstein and more like the light-hearted Quasimodo. Fisher said that in order to demonstrate the look he wanted, this is Jeff Johns now. He's turned director. Johns dipped his shoulder into what struck Fisher as a servile position. To Fisher, there was a big difference between portraying a character who's born with a disability versus one who has been traumatized, transformed by trauma. And he felt Cyborg was a modern-day Frankenstein. I didn't have any intention of playing him as a jovial, cathedral-cleaning individual, he said. My God. So what happened is Jeff Johns suddenly became director, along with Joss Whedon, apparently. He's not just a writer, he's a director. And he is now playing out the scenes like if he's Zack Snyder, trying to portray what he thinks Ray Fisher should do. You've got to ask yourself, what the hell is wrong with these people? Like the level of stupidity. But when you're power drunk, you think you know something that you've never been trained to do. Why were these non-filmmakers interfering in the filmmaking? You're a producer. And why is it that all of a sudden, what Marvel is doing is the model for all movies? It worked for them. Why are you executives so stupid? That worked for them. How many movies has Warner Brothers produced that are successful that didn't involve what Marvel is doing? Why do you suddenly feel because it's a comic book movie, you have to do what Marvel's doing? Why do you feel you need to get $1 billion off the break? What is wrong with you people? And now, suddenly, again, an immense amount of stupidity, but now suddenly you're saying, okay, this is what we want. We want our DC with plenty of heart and fun and jokes and characters that are light and happy and gay. We're going to stick with that now. We're going to stick with James Gunn, and James Gunn will bring it home. Bruh, you are dreaming on a dream. That will never happen. The people who come to DC are not coming for that. Like, how can you be so freaking clueless? In the last, let's see, it was 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. In the last 5 to 6 years, aside from Aquaman, which really lived off the grace of Snyder, the Snyder Cut. What DC movie has ridiculously prospered with heart, what y'all call heart? To me, A lot of these DC movies had heart. But anyway, what y'all call heart and fun and light. What DC movie has done that? They've all flopped. And the movies that have been more grounded in reality have made over $1 billion. Okay? And the reason that happened is because people do not come to DC for Marvel movies. Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan brought back the DC brand because they separated the storytelling from how Marvel tells stories. And Zack Snyder doesn't tell a story like how Christopher Nolan does. And Christopher Nolan doesn't tell a story like how Zack Snyder does. And Patty Jenkins doesn't tell a story like how Zack Snyder does. And the way how they were going to do Aquaman, James Wan would not have told a story like how Zack Snyder did, but it would have been in a world that was consistent. The key was to keep the world consistent. And that is where the continuity failed. It's the continuity failure started with Justice League. Justice League was a movie that looked different to what Zack Snyder did, shot different. The tone of it was different. And that's what affected, in a very negative way, DC. Very negative way. And that's what Diane Nelson's speaking on. She realized they made a mistake. And then, after that, they had Aquaman. And Aquaman was not a Snyderverse film. It is not. Something else, but it's not a Snyderverse film. And then we had Shazam, which is not a Snyderverse film either. And again, it just has to do with the physics of how they do it, how they put it together. Birds of Prey was not grounded in the world like how Suicide Squad was grounded in the world, because how David Ayer did it was not supposed to be a comedy. It was supposed to be a soulful movie. And it was actually supposed to be a lot more grounded. It would have had humor in it, but it would have been more grounded. And so the Harley Quinn movie that came out, the difference is David Ayer's Suicide Squad was grounded in a reality. The world was very consistent with what you saw in BVS, with what you saw in Man of Steel, with what you saw in Wonder Woman. But then that consistency disappeared. And you had movies where they were cheap. They cheap looking, and Wonder Woman 84 looked cheap looking. The CGI was terrible. The action scenes were horrible. Nothing matched up with anything. It was just one of those. It was an ugly film. You know, and then you had after that the Suicide Squad. Now the Suicide Squad was quality. In terms of filmmaking, it was a quality film in terms of the visuals. But the content, the writing was just something that was repulsive to me. I couldn't stomach that film. It was awful. It did not remind me of what the Suicide Squad should be. It was just too infantile and too stupid, you know. So I pass on it. Was it well made? It was well made compared to the other DC films. Yes, the action scenes and so on were good, but the script was garbage, in my opinion. Garbage. The things those guys were saying and so on. And then it was supposed to be jokes because this character with his hands detached from him and just tapping people in the heads. And, you know, I'm not into that. I'm not into that kind of boring, trying to be edgy supposedly jokes because they all died or whatever. It's just, that's not what I see the Suicide Squad as. Okay. So I thought that and I think several people also agree with me on this, I think that Suicide Squad 2016 was actually a better movie than James Gunn's movie. Even though that was his singular vision, that was his thing, somehow it just feels generic, just like that 2016 movie. It's a good ride, but it really ain't got nothing in it. With respect to Black Adam that came after. Again, Black Adam's a pretty solid film. For James, Jeff Johns wrote it, but it still falls short of the mark. And what I mean by solid film, I mean that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson really had a great presence in that movie. But then they kind of dialed back. You could feel the movie was dialed back. And that's the problem with these movies. And I know it's because of Jeff Johns. And even the costuming wasn't that great, but it was dialed back. And all of these movies are they're just like hyper colored. Like they're super duper duper colorful movies. And I'm like, Jesus, not even Marvel goes that that deep into color. Like, you guys are responding to critics saying it wasn't colorful and stuff. I mean, like, God damn. I mean, Jesus, man, I didn't understand it. They did adjust the color grading a little bit on Black Adam, but my goodness, man, my goodness. But yes, Black Adam. I think that if they didn't dial back, if it needs to be rated R, you let it be rated R. Why is it these people can't understand this? Why you have to be trying political? If it's rated R, that just means that, look, James Gunn went rated R with Peacemaker. James Gunn went rated R with his movie, and he went. I mean, nobody said anything about that. So why are they not talking about MPAA rating for that? Why are they not talking about the kids? Or James Gunn's talking all these adults. What about the kiddies, right? Nobody's talking about that. So why is it with Black Adam you can't go all out? Listen, Marvel is the people who take it and dial it back, and they have the team of writers and blah, 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 right? DC don't hold nothing back. DC's supposed to go hard, okay? They go hard in the paint. That's why The Dark Knight is still one of the baddest movies out there, because Heath Ledger went hard. He went hard, okay? When I think of comic book movies, I think of Blade, okay? Because you know what? My boy in that movie, he went hard. That was a hard PG-13. In fact, that could have easily been a rated R because he was cussing and they had F-bombs and stuff in that movie. Hard. When you're going to do it, if you're going to do it and you're going to do it right, then you can't compromise. Nothing. Not runtime, nothing. You're going to go hard, go hard. And when I say go hard, I'm not meaning blood and gore for blood and gore's sake. I'm not meaning cussing for cussing's sake. That's not what I mean by go hard. I mean, if it suits the character and it calls for some extreme things that the character needs to do, then you got to do it. You can't be like, nah, we can't do that in this. No, you go for it. That's what I liked about the 80s movies. That's what I liked about some of the 90s movies, okay? Because I grew up in that time. The movies didn't hold back. If you got to get a certain degree of realism so that it gets people's attention, to get the stakes, you have to believe it mustn't be flippant and it mustn't be a joke. And even if you put jokes in a movie like that, you got to be wondering what's going to happen, because it's not about the jokes. Not saying you can't have jokes in a movie, you can't have a movie funny, but it's just, it has to be organic. It has to suit the situation. It has to be something that at that point in time, because if you're dealing with a bunch of criminals like Suicide Squad, if you're dealing with people who have demented minds, obviously there's going to be funny moments in between them. But like in real life, a funny moment could easily change. Like they can be nice with each other and then suddenly it just lights up and then somebody's killing somebody or something is just happening on the very same team. That is very possible because with these characters, you just never know what could happen next, right? So I'm just saying, I'm not saying that you can't have humor because there's funny things with bad people. Evil people do funny things all the time. And it's kind of funny to see them, you know, they're seriously thinking about it and they're doing or acting on it, and it looks funny from a distance. Of course, if you're involved in the situation, it's not funny at all. But when you're seeing it from a distance, it looks funny. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But what I'm saying is to tell me that, you know, you're putting out these products which you had to force funniness into them. A rated R movie doesn't need to be funny. If it's funny, it's funny. I mean, you know, Chucky, the horror movie Chucky, was it Child's Play? Child's Play is scary, but at the same time, it's funny, right? So I'm not saying that you can't have funniness in it or humor, but you have to understand that that's not the predominant thing. And it's not about some committee telling you, well, here, we need to inject humor right here. No, every movie is its own organism. Every movie has to be treated differently. You can't treat every single movie the same way. This stupid formulaic nonsense. And, oh, this is how comic book characters have to be, so it has to be this way. No, can't do that. Not in real life. Not with live action. That's why we have different directors, because we want different perspectives. We want different takes. We don't want everything to be generic. We don't want everything to be the same, homogenous. We want different stories. We want different feels. We want different takes. If the world is the same, you can do that. The mistake they made was people started to recognize this world and appreciate it and stuff, and then you just change up the design, you change up the approach. You know, the world design. You can see you can build humor inside of a certain world. Right? But when Jeff Johns came in and he totally fucked up Aquaman, because I'll explain to you, even though that movie made money, he did the undersea world in a different approach. James Wan was not going to approach the undersea world like that. It was going to be creepier. It was going to be more mysterious, and that mystery and that creepiness adds to an adventure. Doesn't subtract, it adds to it. But no, the kiddies. It must be fun. It must be hopeful somehow. I don't know how, but it must be. And so we get this kind of nonsense that goes on over and over. And Jeff Johns is behind that. And that's why I've been saying you need to fire this guy. Okay? Anyways. So bottom line, what I'm saying is that, you know, what Diane Nelson was saying about the beginning and then going to DC Studios, these are not the solutions. It's not that DC Studios is the problem. It's that these non-creatives are meddling with creatives. Right now, James Gunn is meddling with Aquaman. Supposedly, your Superman Legacy comes out in 2025. 2025. Why should Mr. James Gunn change up his whole entire movie to suit your needs when all he may need to do is change up the ending? That's it. All this, let the movie run as it is. They're afraid for some reason that the ending would be a cliffhanger and people will ask for more. It doesn't matter. Not at this point in time. There's one more thing I wanted to share with you guys, but I'll do that in a separate video another time. But suffice it to say, lesson number one is don't try to be as other people. Be authentic. Be yourself. Warner Brothers thrives on being a director-led studio. Why are you trying to pivot away from that? It's your modus operandi. Warner Brothers has always been a studio that led in terms of visionary directed movies. Why are you trying to move away from that and be like everybody else? Where is your direction? So it may be that the DC universe may be down for the next 10 years, or they'll listen to the fans. Zack Snyder Justice League in IMAX and cinemas, November 17th. That's the date. You need to move on it. September, mid-September, you should be talking about this. You should be talking about having that movie in cinemas. It is a very good movie, like I said, that supports suicide prevention. Literally, that's part of its message in the movie. The punchline, "I am not broken and I'm not alone," is literally coming from these suicide prevention agencies. That is the theme and motto of them. And literally, the story of Cyborg is about overcoming depression and, as a result, prevention of suicide, because depression is the number one leading cause of suicide in the world. So I do not know how much these people understand what they have in their hands, but I do hope that they will realize these mistakes that they've done before are the reason why their studio is not making money. You cannot blame the creatives when you are the ones making the creative decisions. And the studio has been doing it time and time again since 2016 with after BBS. And it should never have happened. They should have stuck with Zack Snyder, what he was doing. But now that's just something from the past. It's like we can learn. Hopefully they can learn from, because they haven't learned anything. Since Richard Donner's time, they haven't learned anything. These executives do the same foolish nonsense over and over again. But hopefully I'm speaking to executives, or hopefully this message gets to certain executives like Abdi and DeLuca, and they are able to speak some sense into these people who are not thinking at all. They're like not thinking at all. They're listening to the wrong people, whether it's the fans online who are pushing a Jeff Johns narrative, or they're speaking to the gunts. Neither of these people will make them money. Okay? You have to listen to the masses who have been moving freight, who've been buying your products, who've been making box office for you. You're not listening to those people. You are not listening to those people. I can assure you that's the case. And I am one of those people. So I know if you're not speaking to me, I know you're not speaking to most of DC, because I'm a DC fan. First and foremost, I'll go see Joker. I may even go and see Joker Part 2. It depends. I don't know. I'm saying I may not, because it depends on how not DC, but Warner Brothers, how they actually approach how they want to treat the fans. If you're going to mistreat me, I'm just not going to stick around. I'm not going to come to none of your movies. I'm going to sponsor. You're mistreating us because you're not listening to us. And even if you hear us, you're not acknowledging that you hear us, and you're not trying to do anything whatsoever to rectify the situation. You are bullheadedly moving forward in one direction, and it's going to be your demise when it comes to DC. You're going to be destroyed because the audience is not going to show up for those movies. They're not going to show up. Now, if you restore the Snyderverse, the problem will be solved instantaneously. Instantaneously. And you can do whatever you want. But the moment you don't do that, or the moment you don't bring something to the table that's substantial or an equivalency to that in some way, shape, or form, you're just going to, your universe is going to die. It's already dead. What am I talking about? You'll be able to revive your universe if you do that. If not, well, it'll just stay dead. Nobody will care about DC, which will be sad. It will be tragic. Okay, and I know you have a slate of DC movies. I saw a slate of DC movies that are upcoming, and you have some things up in them, but they will not come to fruition. They won't work out well If you don't, if you don't, I can't say this enough. If you don't involve things that excite people, okay, I can care less what Marvel fans think about DC. I can't care less because they're Marvel fans. They're supposed to love Marvel, right? So I don't. I listen to. Okay, so I'm gonna tell y'all something about YouTube, about Twitter, and even YouTube. So this is what I did. I saw one of the people make a comment on how, when you look at the people who are trying to critique Zack Snyder and his movies, not critique, sorry, they're throwing snide comments, they're insulting, whatever. When you go and you check their Twitter account, the Twitter account's been open a month ago, a few days ago, beginning of this year, December, November of last year. This is when James Gunn came into power. So most of them are Gunts. If they're not Gunts, they're Marvel fans. And you can know they're Marvel fans very simply. You go to their Twitter account, and you look, you scroll down, and you'll see mostly Marvel stuff. That means they're Marvel fans. So it's those set of people that generally are coming up, and both of them don't know anything about, DC. They're not DC fans. Okay. You get an occasional DC fan that's there. And the point I'm making is they're trying to make it look, it's just about optics. They're just trying to make it look like DC fans are warring with each other, but we're not warring with each other. Most DC fans are on the same page. Most DC fans want something different. And people will say, well, okay, I'm going to point out something else. The allegations are that Zack Snyder doesn't get comic book movies. He shouldn't work with the universe. Okay. Todd Phillips, Joker. Was that like the classical Joker? Was that the Joker that fell into the vat of acid? Was that you've seen The Killing Joke. You've read The Killing Joke. Todd Phillips' Joker has a name that has never been a Joker name. His story is about a young Bruce Wayne that he meets, and he meets the older Bruce Wayne. The older Bruce Wayne gets eventually murdered and so on. But when you think about it, this is as far away from a Joker story as it'll ever be, right? It's a case study. Christopher Nolan's Batman. Christopher Nolan's Batman, well, first of all, his Batman story kind of fills in the gaps, but Christopher Nolan's Batman is not a Batman from the comics. He's not explicitly comic book accurate. In fact, the suit that he wore wasn't even a Batman suit. It was taking Batman and trying to make what would Batman exist like in the world we live in. Okay? So it wasn't the greatest comic book accurate Batman ever. No, but that's not the point. Okay? So when Jeff Johns is trying to push this is how heroes should be and blah, 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 blah. Well, every time you've tried to portray this perfect hero that you talk about on the screen, which your big old producer, all your advice and everybody listening to you on hand and knee, it's flopped. Aquaman still managed to make a lot of money because you stole from the script of Zack Snyder and then you adapted. Same thing you did with Wonder Woman. But you had to do your own fresh script with Wonder Woman 84. You had to do a fresh script with Aquaman. Not Aquaman, Black Adam. But here's the thing. Here's the kicker. He still stole things from Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's why he didn't want Zack Snyder's Justice League. He didn't want Darkseid to come out. He didn't want this to come out. He didn't want that to come out. Now he's trying to hug the Green Lanterns like this is mine. You shouldn't have to put out no Green Lanterns before I do and all kinds of shit. And you're like, really, Ninja? You think your Green Lantern movie gonna be something? You already put out one Green Lantern was a dud. Okay, you want to put out another Green Lantern and let it be a dud? Oh, we have a successful television series. That's television. That's not a film. I know it's going to come out on HBO Max. It's not going to be a film anyway. But the point is, it's not HBO Max. It's called Max now. But the point is, Jeff Johns doesn't know his boundaries. Guys like Frank Miller understand their boundaries. Frank Miller was brought in as a consultant for BBS, right? And dude want to try and tell people how to do, but of course the actors want to try and capture that spirit of that thing, so they try to pick his brain or whatever. Stan Lee, he wasn't directing everything. He's a great comic book writer, but he just had his little cameos in there, and that was about it. Point being, you're a writer. Just stick to what you do best. Write. And don't try to force people like you forced James Wan to bring in Black Matter. Don't force people to do what you think they should do. And that's what he's been doing. And all these gatekeepers on Twitter and stuff, all these bullies on Twitter who've been trying to force people, like I said to people, you can like what you want. You can like what you like, right? In this world. But you can't force people to like what you like. And I get this feeling like this dude's been heavy-handedly, along with his followers, trying to force people into what he likes in a superhero. And it's not been working. People have been spitting that out, rejecting it, because it has no relevance to them. There's no connectivity. I can't see myself in that. I can't see a situation with somebody I know who's like that. You have these abstractions. You know, Christopher Reeve said, it's not about being heroic when he's playing the role. He has to connect with the people. He has to find a reason why he would want to help somebody, why he would want to help this person. It's not about being a hero and looking at people, I'm the hero here. No. It's about having a generous heart to people because people had a generous heart to you. And that's the thing that, like, these egomaniacs don't get. So they want to portray something pure, but they're not pure themselves. How can you portray something that's not a part of you? You can feign it, but you're not that person. You're trying to portray sincerity and purity, which is what Zack Snyder does. That's what you really want to do. You want an organic, authentic person. That's what people relate to. Not some contraption, not some design by committee on a hero that we look at and we worship from afar, but we don't know what they are up close. And to try and create that illusion, you make jokes. They joke away the problem. And that's just another way of obfuscating, of not facing the problem head on. I don't know why Warner Bros. Won't fire Jeff Johns. I don't know what he has on them or what's the deal with him, but they need to fire the guy. As for James Gunn, Peter Safran, I don't know if you want to call them a couple or what. They're looking for a W, which will never come. I feel sorry for them. They might get W's in TV, but in films, they're not going to get any W's. You know. And Warner Bros. Is going to waste a lot of money and resources funding these guys for flops. That's the harsh reality. They say Gunn has a 4-year contract. Well, why do you make a 4-year contract with the guy? You didn't know what was going to happen. You're going to have to shelve him, and you're going to have to shelve him, and you're going to just have to chalk it up as a loss if you really want to move forward with DC. That's what I got for you guys. That's the Diane Nelson interview. You guys can play it back. It's out 38 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm out of here, but I wish you guys a good night and God bless.